So thanks for coming, everybody. So we're pretty excited to cover this topic. I know it's been a while, but with the start of the new year, we're going to make this a regular thing again. So today we are covering the topic of consistent visual design. And we have our wonderful guest here, Molly Pickett from ASC Com.
Hi, everyone. I'm Molly Pickett. I'm the Assistant Director of Marketing and Communications for the college. We work closely with Zach and Karen and the rest of Web Services team on all kinds of cool marketing and communications stuff and website design and content. And I'm excited to be here and talk more about this. It's really fun to dive into.
We also have our UX designer, Karen Somovisky here. Karen, do you want to say hi?
Hello. I'm looking forward to the conversation.
Awesome. All right. So let's cover the outline really quick, just so you have a pretty good idea of what we're going to be covering. So I will be covering this first half here, which is essentially just talking about getting some definitions across. What do we mean when we're talking about consistent visual design? There's quite a few ways that you could describe it, but they all generally mean the same thing. And we're going to also talk about some of the elements and the principles. The elements being more or less the building blocks of consistent visual design on a website, and the principles being the rules and guidelines of that. And then after we cover that and go over some examples of what's a good use case and what are bad use cases of these elements and principles, we'll kick it off to Molly here. And we're going to be talking about why all of this matters and all the reasons and benefits of consistent visual design. And last, we're also going to cover some questions, very important questions that can help guide your visual design across your website, things that really help with your messaging and guiding your content. And then we'll have plenty of time for a Q&A. So I want to engage you with a question here, if you would indulge me. How would you describe consistent visual design? And anyone can essentially shout out their answers if they want. I'm looking for something that describes consistent visual design, not just online, but also where do we encounter this in the real world?
It's similar like font and colors and sizing across different elements on the website. Or even in real life, like the stop sign feels like all the stop signs need to be like similar sizes and yeah, typeface.
Yeah, that's perfect. Basically, just making sure that there is this not necessarily exact copy of certain elements, but a consistent use of these elements. So in the case of stop signs internationally, you see these, they're pretty much almost always red, and they usually have some kind of white text. It stands out. You usually, when you, no matter what country you're in, you can generally tell what a stop sign is. I noticed we have something in the chat. Thanks, Tracy. Yes, non-distracting, easy on the eyes. That's a good point too. But essentially, yeah, essentially when you whether you're on the road or doing anything else in the real world or online, there are all kinds of consistent visual designs that help make navigating an environment much easier for you. And going on to a more web-based version of that, here are a few useful, these are not authoritative by any means, by the way. These are just what I think are pretty accurate descriptions that are essentially alluding to the same thing here. So one way that you could describe consistent visual design is the predictable and recognizable use of different elements that teaches users how to navigate and access information on a website. Web design with a persistent layout that lets users access information in a similar or the exact same way on all its pages. Or you could use the description of a use of repeating patterns of headers, images, text, and other elements on a website. And we're going to be digging into what elements are, just so we're not confused on that terminology. So the goals of consistent visual design that we are shooting for as content managers or whatever your role is on a website are a few different things. So one of the goals is pretty simple, making it easier to navigate the website, right? And that way you're essentially teaching the users what to expect in terms of environment. And we're going to find out later on how this is very important for people with disabilities. We are also shooting to provide a consistent user experience. And I think this is an equally important thing too. Making sure that the experience that a user is having on one page is consistent with how the experiences that they will have on other pages. So setting an expectation for user experience. And lastly, just making content more accessible, which, although I'm saying simply, is actually a very big deal in this last regard here. And Molly will be able to explain that in further detail. So one of the things I've been talking about a lot so far is our elements. So when I say elements, I'm essentially talking about the basic building blocks of objects and other things on a page. Basically, the things that make a web page. And that can be anything from simple text, paragraphs, things like that. But in the context of Drupal, which is what we're all using essentially here, elements include, but not limited to, things like accordions, boxes, buttons, headings, images, lists, videos, all the interactive elements that you find on any web page. These are all the elements, the basic building blocks of a page. And when I talk about principles, I mentioned this before, but principles of consistent visual design are more or less the guide or the rules that essentially dictate how you're going to use these elements on the page. You'll find these principles more or less in other descriptions of just visual design, graphic design in general. But this is a pretty consistent use of these principles with consistent visual design. Some of these principles include things like repetition, which is kind of like what we would expect, kind of like the obvious principle of consistent visual design. But we're going to find out later that this isn't necessarily having a exact copy paste structure, but rather making sure that there is this repetitive use of certain elements in a certain way. We're going to cover some examples of that. This will also include things like making sure that there is a consistent visual hierarchy, a consistent balance. This also applies to contrast between colors and white space. So in terms of examples, I'm going to cover the elements first before I kind of go into good and bad examples of principles kind of going awry. So elements and principles, when you're using either of them on a website or using them to structure your website, they can either be used very well or they can be used disastrously, which we'll see here in a few minutes. But first, I kind of want to show you what are some of the things that you should probably shoot for in terms of consistent visual design. So on this page here, this is just talking about graduate teaching assistant positions. Some of the good use of these elements that we see here are headings that provide a pretty easy structure to follow, a good use of the lists in conjunction with the headings here. So this is an H2 heading, the Ashton Lab Research Assistant, that's an H3. You see that again with the Outreach Program Assistant and the Outreach Program Manager. And with this design, we can kind of expect these other tabs here to present the information in a very similar way in structure with the same use of the headings and these lists. There's really not a whole lot to cover on this particular page here, but this is just to give you a good idea of how best to use these elements in a way that's consistent or repetitive, in a way that kind of makes a predictable user experience. We're essentially using these elements to kind of give our users expectations of how these other elements are going to be. And on this page here, it's a little bit more simple. So the good use of elements that we want to highlight on this page are the use of headings and the use of accordions here. So the headings, again, provide a sense of structure. They make it clear and easy to scan the page. Because for the most part, users are not really reading, rather than they are scanning for key information on a page. They're not trying to absorb 100% of information on your page. Rather, they're trying to find the key points. They're trying to cut to the chase here. And we can make that easier for them by using these headings in a way that simplifies that experience. They're trying to accomplish a goal. And given that the target audience here, future students, right? So what are some of the things that future students would be interested in with this particular unit? In this case, this is from the Arts and Sciences website. Future students, they care about programs. They care about research opportunities. They care about what's going to be beyond the classroom. And this last section here, well, all of them, but this one in particular is going to be very important when we talk about 5 key questions that help guide the design of your website, which Molly could describe and explain in a way that's way more concise than me. So the fun part, where do we see some of these elements going awry here? Now, I kind of want your input on this. What do you think is going poorly? What's being done very poorly with this page? You can, again, just kind of shout your answers out if you want. I can go into the detail if you like about that. So the bad use case. And this is not to name or shame anybody. This is kind of used on our Sandbox website, but I have seen this before. So this isn't just something I kind of randomly stitched together here. So some of the bad use of the elements, headings. So a common mistake that I see generally is when headings are being used in a way that is trying to enlarge and bolden entire paragraphs. And sometimes it's being done in a very inconsistent manner. So sometimes whole paragraphs, in my case, I've seen, and in this case here as well, either be used in heading 3 or heading 2. That's something you definitely want to avoid, mostly because it's an instant way. It's a very easy way to essentially lose your audience, lose their attention. And more likely, they're going to what we call bounce from the website, where they'll visit the website from a certain page or a different location. They'll arrive there, and essentially they leave after viewing the one page. Another thing too are the lists. Actually, this one doesn't really. So this one actually does have a list. It's just that there wasn't enough space to actually show you the lists. But one of the other ways that the lists are being used poorly here are, you can see down here, the current openings. So essentially what we have here are an entire wall of text. And in that wall of text, essentially within maybe a second of looking at it, your eyes have probably glossed over whatever key information that you want to get out of that list is almost certainly inaccessible to you here. I noticed, looks like we have something in the chat here too. So let's see. Big block of text. Were the tabs really the best solution here? Inconsistent headline sizes. Very chaotic. Headings should be headlines, not sentences. Choices, use a type size. Perfect. Yeah, these are all perfect points. For some reason, I was expecting to actually hear the answers rather than just read the chat. Feel free to include them in the chat, by the way. I was just, for some reason, single-mindedly expecting someone to kind of shout out answers like it's a classroom or something. But these are all very good points here. Yeah, there are huge blocks of text here. The tabs are being very poorly used here, and tabs might not even be useful all. Thank you for pointing that out, Gabe. The headline sizes are inconsistent, and it's very just a chaotic mess. And oftentimes, what year is it? Do we still need 20 openings published? Can they be archived? Exactly. There are a lot of different sites out there that do have these very, I guess you could say, are things that should be archived, but are still lingering on websites. And not only that, I mean, this is a good, I guess, it's not necessarily talking about the elements per se, but it's, well, maybe you could argue it is talking about the elements. Yeah, I think maybe that's something we could hash out in the Q&A, because it's a very good point. But ultimately, I think the point I'm trying to drive home is that, yeah, all of these elements are being used very poorly. They lead to a terrible user experience, and you're essentially just asking for your users to quit your website after maybe 10 seconds, if that, since user attention is very, very limited. So I harped on a lot about elements and good use cases and bad use cases of those building blocks. So I kind of want to talk about the principles here. What are some of the rules that we see being used well? What is providing not only just a good user experience, but what are we teaching the user about our website or a certain web page, and where the interactive elements are. So with this one, I would say it's using the contrast, the colors very well. There is a good repetition in terms of placement of text versus interactive elements. There's a sense of unity, and there's a clear visual hierarchy. But I also kind of want to read your input in the chat again, or you can voice them out too if you want. What do you think is a good use of these principles? Or what are some of the good rules that this page is following? Oh, here they are. So contrast between color and text, yes. Gabe, decent vertical rhythm. That's actually a pretty big compliment coming from Gabe. Consistent and repetitive use of layout. Yeah, that's all right. Not overwhelmed with a huge block of text. Perfect, yeah. Now, this is essentially just trying to focus on two separate elements here. And it is a little tricky trying to get all of this from a certain page onto a PowerPoint presentation. But what I think is being done well here is the use of repetition. So we see a lot of these are all call boxes. Pretty much all of the content is being condensed into a call box here. So for example, the repetition is essentially teaching us that all the other content on this page is essentially going to be in the form of a call box. In a way, we actually have a guide to visually of what to expect. These elements are all interactive. So I can easily guess and predict that with one element here, having a link to read more, I can also read other ones as well. I don't really have to even take a look to guess that. It provides a pretty good expectation right off the bat. There's also a visual hierarchy at play here. So given the fact that there are 3, I can probably at the top here and 4 at the bottom, I can expect that maybe these ones are probably a little bit more important, or alternatively, it could just be a simple case of this is trying to balance out an odd number of call-out boxes. So the visual hierarchy may or may not communicate that, but for the most part, visual hierarchy can communicate that as well. So I would like to kind of go into a bad use case of our rules and principles. And I know this is a little hard to see given the fact that it's so zoomed out, but I still kind of want to read some responses to see what are some of the bad use cases. So of the rules or lack of following the rules at all, which is probably maybe a better question. I would like to kind of read what you think is going awry with this page. It's pretty obvious to probably most of us, but I still kind of want to see some answers here. Text color, almost everything. complete lack of heading. Bad color contrast on that reddish box. Buttons are inconsistent. Video is buried when it's probably the most useful content. That's perfect. Yeah.
I
Yeah.
think also, Zach, I'll shout something out.
Yeah.
I think this is a really great example of, and I think somebody did bring up the headings, but there's nothing you can scan on this page and understand where you can go to find the very like particular piece of information. And this is a great example of, if I come on this page and I'm looking for something, I'm probably never coming back.
Yeah, exactly. For me, I haven't seen anything this bad per se, but I have seen use cases of some of these rules and yeah, some of these principles here, essentially accomplishing almost like smaller versions of that. I have seen, unfortunately, very poor visual hierarchy. I've seen pages that have no sense of unity. There's like no consistency whatsoever. And the color contrast will just sometimes just bleed in together. And with the Bucks update, now that's probably created a few hassles as well. It's just kind of to be expected because there's so many websites. But essentially, even before that, this was kind of an issue. And sometimes it's kind of hard to kind of assess all the bad use cases out there. But essentially, what we can use from this example are things to avoid. Anything that kind of breaks the unity of the website, anything that has like no sense of repetition whatsoever, anything that has like poor color contrast. These are all kind of things condensed into a single page that we should avoid doing. So there are ways to follow these rules that help avoid this kind of situation. Can we pick a button with at least? Can't tell if there's a good reason for red and white buttons. Yeah. Poor line like this. Well, yeah. This is more rather, I think maybe a better way to describe this. It's not so much a bad use of principles, but rather a lack of following any of these principles. So these are more or less the principles that are missing. This page that essentially make this page completely just chaotic. So this is the part where I kick it off to our guest Molly here. So I'm going to give the floor to her and let her expertise guide the conversation.
Cool. Thanks, Zach. Those are some good examples in practice, and you guys are on top of it and pointing out the good and the bad. So it's great that you're able to recognize that. I'm going to spend the next few minutes talking about, why this all matters. And of course, we're going to start with accessibility. So we talk a lot about digital accessibility in this group and at the college, and how important it is from an equity standpoint that all of our websites function consistently no matter who the user is. So the visual design of the site is a huge part of that digital accessibility, and everything that Zach just talked about can play a role in that experience. The lack of consistency can burden any user with learning how to navigate your site, but it can especially be true for users that are, neurodivergent or have age-related issues or visual impairments. For example, for those who use assistive technology, a lot of times they use heading styles in cascading order to move throughout the page. So it'll jump from all the H1s to all the H2s to all the H3s and so on. And if those headings are out of order or used inconsistently, like we saw in that example, the screen reader is going to jump around the page and it'll be confusing for them to get the information they need in the way that you intended, and they'll be seeing it differently than other folks do. So, the main point that we want to hit here is that having a consistent visual design is absolutely vital with keeping your content accessible and fulfilling your commitment to the, digital accessibility policy at our institution. So things like colors and contrast and font size and all things like that, alt text on images. These are all things that are important and necessary for digital accessibility, but they also, benefit everyone. Zach and I were talking about the curb cut effect, which is so fun to think about in practice here for websites. I know it goes way beyond that, but you know, things that are designed for accessibility, but they benefit for everyone. You know, how many people use captions on videos if they want to watch them without sound on, or use text to speech to read out something to them? These are all things that, you know, go so much further than what they were designed for. And that's why it's important for us to, you know, incorporate them on our website and, you know, make it better for everyone. So you can go to the next slide, Zach. Another reason why consistent visual design matters is that it promotes ease of use on your site. So if you're repeating similar elements, you know, using similar headings and layouts across your site, it's easier for your users to navigate through your pages. This will reduce the cognitive work it takes for them to find what they're looking for, like we talked about earlier, and eliminate any confusion that they may feel when they're looking. A good example of this is how we talk about program requirements. So if your department offers multiple majors or academic programs, making sure that each of those pages looks similar with, you know, the same headings and the language that is used, it'll help the student be able to scan quickly for, you know, what are my prerequisites for all of these different majors, or what are the course names that are required, or where are the electives? You know, if you're using similar elements, they'll be easily able to navigate between pages and see what they need to see. So our main goal here is to just give the user a better experience with your site, you know, rather than them having to click around a bunch and eventually probably email you for clarification. You can go ahead to the next slide. Similarly, consistent visual design also helps improve memorization for your users when they come back to your site. So it'll be easier for them to find what they need, like scholarship information or, you know, program requirements. I need to go back and check what I have to do, or, you know, how can I donate to the program? Okay, I know to go to the giving page and it'll list out some priority funds or something like that. So it'll help, you know, retain your audience, which is the main goal. Go ahead. So all of this comes back to improving the user experience of your site. So if your users have a good experience with your site, they're more likely to engage with your department and take the actions that you want them to take, right? Sign up for my newsletter, donate to this fund, apply to this program. You know, you get the idea. Consistent visual design helps to keep users on your site for longer. Like Zach talked about, that bounce rate, especially if you're being intentional about it. Something that we've done on the college's main site is look at the analytics for our most highly trafficked pages. So once we get that information, we'll go to those pages and we add some links to other relevant content that'll help the user along their journey. For example, we know the traffic to our major pages is high. So we've put a button for students to contact advising, since we know that's one of the big next steps that they'll take to learn more about the program. And instead of then having to find and click around to find where to find their advisor for more information, it's right there for them and they can click and go right where they need to go. So to pull from what Zach was saying earlier, repetition is okay. Don't be afraid to reuse images, titles, or buttons across your site. It'll help your audience remember and make it easier for them to, you know, move through the site. So with that being said, I want to take a quick pause to zoom out. Before you do any of this, it's important for you to think about who those main users are for your site. So who is your primary audience? And your site should be designed with them in mind. Again, for the main site, we know from our analytics that our primary audience is current and prospective students. And with that information, we've adjusted the top level navigation to move their pages up so it's easier for them to find. And we've added links to the homepage for them to be able to find what they need quickly. Things like, you know, advising information or program information or scholarships or career success or, you know, things like that that we know that they're looking for based on page views and things like that. So diving a little deeper, once you've identified who your primary audience is, you know, think about what their digital trends are. For current and prospective students, most of them are Gen Z. And what do we know about Gen Z? We know that they have shorter attention spans. So it's important to organize the site in a way that's scannable, you know, using those elements like headings, accordions, bullets, those examples that Zach talked about. They're most likely also viewing your site from their mobile device. Just because something looks good on a desktop doesn't always mean that it translates well to a phone. So it's important to double check that when you're making pages. Always pull it up on your phone and see, am I getting a similar experience? Oh, this is way too long. Oh, maybe we shorten this, things like that. We also know that they want authenticity from their institution. They can see through, the marketing fluff. So just tell them what they need to know. Short, quick statements, like we talked about, bullets, that will help them scan what they need to scan, and they're less likely to click away. It's also important to use language that they understand on our pages and in our main navigations. I know we fall into this trap a lot. We know what things like interdisciplinary or global citizen or pedagogy mean, but most 18-year-olds don't. So that's something to keep in mind as you're refreshing your sites. Using words that they understand or high-level navigation, headings, things like that, short and sweet, so that they'll know what they're looking for. They also want to hear from their peers about their experiences, things like videos, like we noticed on that one page, quotes, stories from other students really resonate with them, rather than the institution, telling them what they think the student experience is. That can also be a huge undertaking to gather this type of content. Departments are always welcome to use college or university stories from the main site or news.osu.edu to get started, pulling short quotes or embedding a video from the college's YouTube or the main university's account. That is always cool to do and a great way to connect students back and forth between all of the pages. You can go to the next slide, Zach. Perfect. Okay, so fun little way to end this. This may look familiar to some of you. No spoilers. We've talked about this before in a few other meetings, but from a content perspective, the bulk of work our office is doing this time of year, on our website and the pages that you're designing, we designed, you saw the sort of admitted students page that we put together. We're doing a lot of work for yield season, and it's aimed at admitted students and their parents. And so we've come up with 5 questions that your site should strive to answer with its content and design. Like I said, this may look familiar to some of you, but I'll just run through them quickly, and then we can move on to the Q&A. So the first question that your site should strive to answer with the elements that it's using and the content that it's using is, why this major, or why this X, Y, and Z if you're a program or a center or something like that. Oftentimes for us, high school students and their parents have a limited understanding of, the number of academic majors, even the subject matter of a lot of our academic majors. And so this is a good time to spend, discussing what your programs are, what their areas of focus are, kind of give them an overview of the program. Second question is, why this major at Ohio State? Highlight your strengths, any distinctions that the department has, or unique things that the major offers that you can't get in another institution. What can I do when I get here? Discuss those high impact practices, first year seminars, special courses, research, study abroad programs, internships, any opportunities for engagement inside or outside the classroom. This is a great thing to talk about and show. If you can get current students to provide a quote or a nice video that you can paste on that page, students hearing from other students is always great to do. Another important thing to ask is, how will you take care of me when I'm a student in your program? This is an opportunity to discuss the community within your department, how students have been able to make meaningful connections, build a community. This could also help with parents, thinking about safety or affordability or mental health resources or career success resources, things like that. And then, of course, the big one, what can I do with this degree once I graduate? This is a great opportunity to discuss career outcomes, real examples from alumni, a nice quote or two, similar to the way that we laid out those call out boxes of here's some things of what our alumni are doing. How are they using their degree? What was their path like? These are all great things and a great kind of baseline to talk about throughout your website. We've been working with Chenway's team in the Office of Undergraduate Recruitment. We've got some other resources for departments to use during yield season. We've put a link there. We'll share it out as part of the follow-up, but this is definitely a big focus for our office right now, and it's really impacting how we're designing our site, where we're putting buttons. We know that there are a lot of admitted students coming to the site right now, moving things around on the homepage so it's easier for them to click, what are my next steps or how can I learn more? We've got things at the top level navigation. We've got buttons on other pages, videos, short little snippets, quick calls to action at the top. What are my next steps? Okay, here's 5 things that you can do, or here's, for parents, here's some information that you might need as well. So I guess the last thing I'll say is that, it's important to give yourself grace and time to do this foundational work and to make, these website updates, message development and site development, it doesn't happen overnight. And it often takes a lot of input from other department stakeholders. So, as you're asking yourself these questions, if your main audience is, current students or future students, don't be afraid to talk to your current students if you can. If you have student workers, or if you've got clubs or, students that are around, they can offer great feedback on your site design and your content, and they're often part of that audience that you're trying to reach. But that can be true for any primary audience. Don't be afraid to ask, what do you think, or do some user testing. They'll give you great feedback. So I guess start small, remember who your audience is, and you'll start to see an impact. And that's all I got.
That was brilliant. Thank you, Molly.
Well, thank you.
So this is actually the final slide here. So that covers the whole presentation. We want to give the rest of the time here. We got about 20 minutes. We like to use time for the Q&A. So you can either, just shout your questions out, or you can post them in the chat here, and we'll just use the remainder of the time for that.
I had a question about using a lot of photos on a website. Like, I'm interested in having like a digital gallery on, and I didn't know if because I know that there's a slideshow function, but it only allows for 8 photos, and I think they have to be the same like orientation. But I was wondering if, making like a gallery of a lot of photos, is there like a best practice for that, or should like a different platform, should it direct the user to a different kind of platform, or what's the thought on that?
That's a very good question. I mean, I'm sure there are cases where using a gallery layout is totally fine. Something like 8 photos is not, I don't think that's a lot. I don't know, maybe some other people here might disagree with me for a page. It really depends. So although Drupal has a content type that is specifically for image galleries, I think it's usually a better practice of maybe using either like a basic page, or I think maybe a better use case would also be like a news story, since if it's a news story about an event that your unit is hosting or presenting, then I think maybe you could I think you probably make a good case for using or having at least images aligned on a basic page in a way that looks like a gallery. With the image gallery in Drupal, given the way it works and some of the issues it has, I would probably not recommend it. So if you do go that route, I would personally advise just either putting it on a basic page or a news page, or if you have a newsletter and that is your platform for talking about events or updates about your department, I think those pages would work fine too. Newsletter stories. Hopefully that answers your question. If not, I can clarify and maybe go into detail, or I can follow up on it too if you like.
Yeah, you can. Yeah, I'll like try something out, and then I'll see what happens with it. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. there anything in the chat?
I can add a question. This one's more general. My name's Claire, and I was curious if there was anything kind of more scrappy than I've seen the Marcom Partners like Teams group for arts and sciences, but I'm wondering if there's kind of a community or a forum that's a little bit more scrappy for like tips and tricks, troubleshooting for anything from design to, design of these pages, but, could run the full gamut of kind of more of a creative community that's not so buttoned up as the arts and sciences Marcom. I've been interested in it, so I just didn't know if it's something I could connect with somebody more on.
Sure. So I think the Marcom group could become more, it's kind of intended to already be a creative place for people to ask questions and be more informal. It's something that, we need to spend more time kind of, building out and things like that. But you are always welcome to ask any questions that are on your mind. I'm sure other people are having those questions as well. So don't be afraid to post in there if you do, want to get some input on something. And we'll kind of continue to build out and modify and put some more resources in there. If it is something that you specifically have a question on, you're always welcome to reach out to me or anyone else on the team, and we're happy to offer, feedback and things like that. There's also a really nice Teams group that Zach runs that's more website focused if there's questions like that.
Yeah, I was going to bring up that there is that second team. It's called ASC Drupal Standard
Yes.
Websites, and that one tends to be fairly vibrant with people who are like trying to help each other troubleshoot, things, or like proposing more fluid, like before you put the ticket in, sort of things. Like,
Yeah.
would it be cooler if it did this or that, or like discussions around like what should it actually do? So, yeah, I would recommend that group. So
Yeah, maybe you guys could put in the chat like both groups, because that sounds like something I'd want to keep tracking.
Yeah.
Yeah, I can send you a link to our group, assuming I don't know if you're already in that or not, but if not, I can send you a follow-up and with an invite link to that.
Yep, I'm just in the arts and sciences Marcom Partners one. But yeah, if you could I'm Jellic.4. Yeah, if you want to send me an invite, that'd be great.
Will do. See something here in the chat. Can I get an invite to this Teams groups and Caroline? Sure, Julia. I can give you a link to.
Same thing, so thanks.
Wow, these groups are getting popular now. I honestly wasn't even aware of the Marcom one, to be totally honest with you. So that's kind of cool to know that's out there as well.
Yeah.
It's mostly just Gabe talking to the void.
yeah, the Marcom one, I post whenever we have a story because I don't know what stories the college is interested in, and I've been tasked with trying to make sure the college knows what we're doing. So.
Yeah, it's helpful to see what departments are working on. And we love seeing those links. So we appreciate you sending them.
Well, and a while back when we first set that up, like the idea was sort of like, hey, everyone post your stuff there so that others can like retweet you and things, but I haven't seen that happen just yet. So I was popping on here to ask a question sort of related to everything we were talking here about. Like, I know that there is, I'm trying to figure out exactly how to phrase this, but like, I know that there's a line that we want to ride between like, how do we support whatever it is, 39 departments and centers and 4 million websites within the college and have some consistency around that. And like locking things down and stuff. So I'm wondering, like, I feel like a lot of times things get misused in ways it is because that there's not an option to do it the right way, right? So you will have someone with a very legit reason why they want a larger display type of 2 sentences long on like a news or event post or something like that. But the only way to accomplish that is make it an H2, right? Which is bad for a screen reader and stuff like that. And so I wonder um, if you have recommendations around navigating that, especially when a lot of us are just the staff members being told what to do by the people who can fire us. And they want it bigger, they want it like call this out, right? I'm like, I don't have that ability to just do it, right? Um, Related to that is also sort of like the best practices for visual hierarchy are not always, and the best practices for visual hierarchy and the best practices for like clean, consistent layouts and user is also oftentimes in direct opposition to best practices for accessibility. And so writing that line, like, just so happens during this meeting, we got the report from our like ADA thing, and we got nixed 100 times for having links that say link here or go here or more, right? And yet almost all the examples we were shown today were call out boxes with red boxes that say more, right? And which looks great and is easily navigatable to everyone except for the screen reader. So, like, yeah, not a direct question in there, a conversation point, thoughts?
Yeah, no, I definitely know what you mean there. Without a guide of sorts, it's really hard to kind of navigate that position because you're between a rock and a hard space with that one, right? Because on the one hand, yeah, you're trying to be as accessible as possible, and on the other hand, there are these principles and ways to design a website for the best user experience possible that might contradict each other. And given that at OSU, we're an institution that has a bunch of different departments and people over us, and it's fairly decentralized, it can be a bit chaotic. Um, so yeah, that's a tough tightrope to walk.
Yeah. Hey,
Um,
Zach, I'll throw something out there.
mhm.
So Gabe, one of the things that we have, sort of two thoughts I have to what you're saying is, one, having to do this sort of big push to get through what we're calling, Bucks 1.0 and getting our facelift, which was very much just a facelift. Uh, and I think we talked about this a little bit before, our major content types, we're going to really start to review in the next year and try to really enhance them and hopefully add a lot more flexibility, and sort of things like that. One of the things that we have upcoming pretty soon is we're going to, so on one of the pages, you can put like a short description in, which gives you sort of that call out text, little bigger text without having to be an H heading. So that's going to actually come out and go into our advanced area. So you'll be able to put that little element on any of those pages that has the ability to add an advanced call out element to it. So I think that will be a nice feature for people. We're also going to introduce this call to action collection. That's just be another way to sort of like get some just poppier text in there that's just not a box with a link. So those things should be coming up pretty quickly. But then, like I said, sort of in the course of the next year, we really do want to like, okay, now we're buxed. So now how do we like take it to the next level and really review all of our content types for
Yeah,
desktop?
because I know. Yeah, because and I'm happy to hear that's coming because I think that that's one of the things, particularly here in the Department of Design, where maybe we also have a larger population that is sensitive to these issues or have opinions on these issues, maybe not with the right sensitivity all the time. This idea of like, well, it's not a block quote, so I'm not going to call it a block quote, and I don't want that stupid little red line next to it, but I do want, this other thing, I do want it bigger, or, it is a call out, but it's not a call out box, and like things like that. So yeah, I'm happy to hear some of those things are coming, and maybe some better ways on the back end of this to also mitigate that like, no, we understand this is the fourth more link in a while. Like, more is a standard and accepted practice in ASC, but not link, or not, here, or, like whatever that word is,
Or the click here is a
right. Yeah.
classic.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I saw something recently. That's a good point. And we're going through and starting to update this where we can of, instead of saying, donate here or click here or, read more, trying to make it say, read Molly's story or donate to this fund, or kind of put a little bit more context of like what the link is that they're going to. It's tricky because, you are limited in space sometimes with some of the sections. So we're trying to make those updates where we can. Also thinking about like email call to actions, rather than click here, visit the Department of Design's website or something like that, just so that they
Mhm.
know kind of what they're getting to. But it's tricky. So we're trying to make those updates where we can. It's something that we kind of recently were like, oh, we need to start putting more context on some of our links. So it's a slow process, but where we can, we're just trying to make some updates to give a little bit more context.
Yeah, I've tried to do some of that as well, and it seems like, it'll work really well on desktop and really well on mobile, but then there'll be like weird breakpoints on the in-betweens that like it
Yeah.
won't work right. And you'll be like, okay, well, when it goes like this, it's fine. And when it's like this, it's fine. But on iPad, it
Right.
sucks, right? And doesn't have the right leading or line height.
I think that's another, the breakpoints is a good
Yeah.
and
Hmm.
I think we only have 2 currently, so we really need to look at least a third, if not a fourth, to kind of solve those, since the world of devices is just going to continue to grow.
Yeah,
So,
true.
sorry, my dog.
Or I would
Yeah.
suggest that it's just like further up, like it goes to phone with earlier. It's like it's either desktop or phone. You can't account for like Galaxy 8s and iPad minis and like Kindles. I don't know what else we're trying to look at this on, but like switches.
Yeah, I don't know if I'm an outlier. I'm still using a Galaxy 9, I think. So whenever I want a mobile experience that's not in the browser, I just use that, and I never find anything that kind of gives me a good representation of that. And it also kind of follows up to that. It wasn't that long ago the university was giving out free iPads. So given the fact that that probably increased, that no doubt increased how often websites were accessed from that specific device. Yeah, there's a lot that kind of goes into that. Well, we're at 2 till. Unless anyone has any questions, I think we're ready to wrap up. If everyone else is feeling pretty good.
I didn't want to usurp the time, so I'm trying to like leave space for someone else to jump in here. But I did have like one other kind of related question, I guess, to what we're saying here.
Sure.
Maybe it's a feature request. I'm wondering if there's something similar to what we recently got with images, which is like the ability to mark them as decorative so that like screen readers could skip them if they're not important. I wonder if there's like a similar feature thinking about PDFs, um, in the sense that like there's been a recent like trend to just assume like PDFs have no role on the web here at OSU and make information significantly harder to find or use instead of like just being able to provide the PDF and provide an alternative, right? Like it's not always, and certainly there's work to be done around accessible PDFs as well. But like, you know, the thing I'm thinking about right now is like, you know, we have PDFs on our website that are like our major, like our bingo sheet, our requirement sheets. And all of that is redundant information on the page. Like there's also all that information in HTML, but the PDF is a more useful teaching tool and recruitment tool and, you know, conversation tool. So we don't want to like get rid of the PDF, but we also are getting like flagged for linking to PDFs a little bit from an accessibility standpoint. And Arts and Sciences website is a real, there's at least one that has gotten me. Every single advisor in the world is like, why can't I just look at the GE requirements anymore? I have to download a new Word document every single time and open Word to just show a student why Psych 2220 wasn't an accepted course to take, right? So I'm wondering like if there's opportunity for something in between the like kill all PDFs and providing accessibility, you know, in that discussion. So
Yeah, I'm not.
yeah, the registrar's website is almost unusable now that it doesn't have any PDFs. Like at least those of us who go to it every single day, talking to Matt there in the chat. But
Do they use Word documents or?
no, you just can't find anything because it's all in HTML now. Like
Oh,
and searching sucks.
I think it's good. I think it's something worth following up on for sure. Mostly just because of time constraints, and
Yeah, definitely.
I don't have a good answer. Also, is why. Uh, but yeah, since we're one after, so I think we're good to go. Thanks for everyone for showing up. This was like the first presentation we had in quite a while since it's the start of the new year. But yeah, thanks for all the great questions. Thank you all for participating in my questions. And again, thanks for Molly's time for making this such a great presentation. All right. Y'all have a great afternoon.